Hey, it's Jessie from squeegeeandink, and in this course we're going to show you how to screen print t-shirts for your own brand. In this course I'm going to show you all the steps needed to screen print this 3-colour design on a t-shirt. Additionally, I'll show you how to add personalised branding to your t-shirts and to create custom packaging that will make your t-shirt brand stand out. In this course we will cover garment choices, artwork, sizing and preparation, screen coating and exposing, registering multicolour designs, ink options, screen printing t-shirts, printing inside neck labels, screen cleanup, and lastly branding and packaging. When taking this course you'll have full access to our screen registration template and our printable area template, both of which will be fully demonstrated in this course. Things to look for when you're picking a garment for your t-shirt printing are things like whether the shirt is organic cotton. This just means that it's probably a higher quality shirt and it's going to be nice and smooth to print on, which will make your print appear smoother and crisper when you come to print it. Another consideration is that it has side seams. So on some of the shirts they're actually tubular, they don't have a side seam, and that means that when you wash them they can twist and be a little bit deformed on the person. So a side seam on a shirt is a really good indication that it's a high quality shirt. Another thing to consider is we like these types of things. So they're small little side labels, and if you notice they're kind of offset from the centre. That means that when we're doing our branding on the neck, we don't have to include the size every single time. That just means that you're actually setting up less screens when it comes to printing, because you can print the same logo on all the shirts and people can still reference the size label just there. Another thing is that your shirt includes wash care instructions. So in some countries that's a legal requirement when you're reselling the shirts, and it's just a very nice little thing to have already included in there, and it's also probably tear away if you're going for these types of shirts. It's just something to consider. Another thing is that you can get good stock of these. You don't want to find your best shirt and then run out of stock. So these kind of shirts are held in large quantities in wholesalers around the country. So we're pretty much never going to run out of these, hopefully. And other considerations are that they're unbranded to start off with. It's a very discreet little size label, so we can go ahead and decorate that fully and make it look like our own branded shirt. The shirt that we're going to be printing on for this course is the Creator shirt by Stanley & Stella. So there's a few reasons why we've gone for this choice. So we've gone for the off-white colour because we didn't want a very bleached shirt colour, because we feel like that's going to work really well with our particular artwork. We also love the eco-credentials of Stanley & Stella. So this is an organic cotton and it's also like vegan accredited, and it couldn't get any more green in our opinion. So we love that type of thing. It's very easily brandable with the size label that I talked about before. It's very nice and smooth surface, so it's going to hold our print and make it look really vibrant and freshly printed. So there's some of the considerations that we make for our own brand, and I hope that that can guide you to making good t-shirt choices too. When you're screen printing your shirts, the most important thing is probably the image size and the print location on the shirt. So I've created a template here and it's called the printable area, and they are dimensions that we've worked out that are going to be great guides for you to do your designs against. This is the printable area template, and I've opened it up within Illustrator just to show you around a little bit clearer. We've actually used the unisex Creator t-shirt as the base for our t-shirts in this template, and then we've used the Cruiser, which is one of the Stanley Stella hoodies, as the example for the hoodie side. So we're just printing a t-shirt today, so I'm going to show you what we've done. We basically went and measured all the dimensions of the Creator shirt from top to bottom, across the chest and what the arm length was. and this is based on the smallest, or on the size small of the creator shirts. From there we distinguished what the printable area would be for our largest print area in our setup, in order to get the biggest print area for the front chest, the inner neck label and the sleeves. We've also done that for the back print as well. So that's just based on a couple of considerations in the studio, like how big our platen size is on our press. So as long as we make sure our images fit within these red boundary boxes, we should be good to go when it comes to printing them in real life. As a quick estimation of how large I want my particular design to be on these shirts, I'll just quickly paste in my image, and I'll just bring it over here towards the back of this t-shirt. If I zoom in, I can see that if the image is 35 centimeters wide by 50 centimeters tall, that's going to take up a large proportion of that shirt, especially when it's wrapped around somebody's body. So I want it to be large, but I don't want it to be enormous or oversized. So I think I'm going to go for around the 30 centimeter mark. And just looking at the proportions of my image, it's not going to be too tall either, and it should still fit within that boundary box, which I estimate it to be around the 40 centimeters tall. So they're the rough estimations of how large I'm going to make my image for my shirt. Now we know what size our image is going to be on our shirts, we can start figuring out what the film positives are going to look like. So we need to have film positives printed onto acetate sheet that register and line up with each other. These are going to be used to expose our screens, and I'm just going to walk you through how to add the registration marks and separate the layers onto their own film positives. I'm going to open up my platen template from within Illustrator so that I can edit it. So if I find it, which is in my downloads, I'm going to say File, Open, Downloads, and it's my platen template there. Open them up. And let me just quickly talk you through what you're going to see on the registration template. When we can see our layers, I've distinguished a few different things here. So the first one is the artwork layer. This is where you're going to place your artwork, and it also contains some registration marks. And the most important part of this template is this box here. So this is the platen size. So we can't print anything that's bigger than that platen size on our particular carousel. So we've distinguished that our platen, which is the board that you print the t-shirts on, is 16 by 22 inches. So we don't want to go right up to the edges of that. So I've figured out the sizing, and we want to stay within that kind of constraint. Let's talk about these other layers. So we've got the small screen. If I bring that up, if I just toggle this eye on and off, the small screen is like quite a common screen that we use. So we're going to use these screens for small chest locations, for example. So I've mocked up that the outside screen dimensions are 20 by 24 inches. So that means that it can print in a kind of area around like this kind of location. So we can't go right up to the edges if we're using a small screen because it's not quite tall enough. So that's just something to bear in mind. If I toggle that one off again and I put on the large screen. So the large screen, when I turn that one on, you can see it's much larger than the platen size. So that's going to be great for printing a large back piece, for example, because I can use a lot more of that platen and it'll be really comfortable printing that kind of size. And then if I toggle on the placements layer, this is just a guide, but it's just quite handy, just so you can determine some standard sizes for things like a left chest, front chest, and back print sizes. And it also kind of gives you an estimation of where to locate those images on the screen. So you'd want a left chest to be in this kind of area, just so that you can reach that left chest location when you come to printing the shirt. And again, you want the back print in the middle, so that when you have it on the shirt, you're not printing at the edges or anything like that. You're printing in the easiest location on the screen. I can turn those off quickly. So I'm going to find my artwork now. I'm going to make sure I'm on the artwork layer so that I can place onto that layer. I'm going to say File, Place. I'm going to find it on the desktop. There's this Hey You artwork right here. So I can place it in. I need to also make sure that it's embedded. So once it's already highlighted here, I'm just going to press embed. And it's a few artworks together, so it might even have this bounding box. So I can get rid of that by just highlighting this little box, deleting that, and that just makes sure that I can manipulate these images on their own. So if I grab my back design, I'm just going to make sure that it's the right dimensions. If I just go over the top of it, I'm going to just double check here on the width that it's 300 millimeters, which is perfect. That's going to hit on my platen and on my shirt, and it will easily fit on my layer. And it's not too tall either, so keeping the same proportions, it's only 40 centimeters tall, so that's all very doable. I'm going to bring over my design, and I think what I'm going to do is I want to be able to locate these registration marks on the platen still, but I'm just going to drag them down a little bit so that I've got room to make a nice big print. And drag these up as well. Now I'm ready to drag in my artwork and I can start separating it. I'm ready to start separating this design, so I'm going to make sure I'm grabbing all of the registration marks and the design, and I'm just going to bring it to the left hand side. I know that I've got 3 different colours in my design. The t-shirt is actually going to show up in this area, so I don't need to think about that. I can just make 3 copies right next to each other. So I'm just going to copy and paste 2 more layers. And this is just a super quick method, but I'm going to label which colour I want on each of the layers as well. So this is going to be a black. This one's going to be the yellow kind of colour. And this is going to be the red. With my design, I've already kind of neatened it up, so I've made sure that all the layers are just butting up next to each other and there isn't overlapping. I've also figured out that every time you see any kind of red colour, that's the same red throughout all the image. So we're not getting lots of different variations on those colours. A quick method for separating these would be to lock some of the layers and delete out anything that isn't relevant. So for this layer, I'm going to lock the black. I'm going to select with the direct selection tool an area of black, and I'm going to say select, same, fill colour and stroke, and then I can go Command 2 or Object, Lock, Selection. So it shows you that it's Command 2 there. Then what I can do is just highlight anywhere on this image, and it should just select the other 2 layers and leave out the locked ones. So I've selected it, I can press delete and it's deleted the other 2 layers for me. What I can then do is say Object, Unlock All. I can select this black again. I don't want to select anything on the page because it might manipulate the other images that I've already got on the whole artwork. So I'm just going to do that again. I'm going to say pick a little bit of the black, say select, same, fill colour and stroke, and I'm going to make sure that it's all the way black, all of the zeros, and that's going to print a nice thick, dark, rich film positive for me. So I can press OK, and that layer's complete. I can go to the yellow, and again I'm going to lock this down, delete all the irrelevant layers and colours. So I can just go onto my direct selection tool and select an area of yellow. It will come up on this swatch when it's definitely the right colour, and I can say select, same, fill colour and stroke, and say Command 2 or go Object, Lock, Selection. And again I can highlight all the way around here, making sure I don't pick up any registration marks on the way around, and I can delete. Then I can say Object, Unlock All. I can pick another bit of yellow, and I can make sure that it's pure black again. And I can go onto the red one. So I can select some red,
select same fill color stroke again, and I can lock it, drag over all the other colours, delete them, and then I'm left with my red. Just going through that is quite a lengthy process, but once you go through it, then you really know that you've got and isolated each of the colours and separated them out. So I want to actually build in a little bit of overlapping of my colours when I come to print them. So if I unlock everything, which it is, on my design I would like a little bit of stroke, which is an outline which is going to sit underneath the other layers on my yellow and on my red. So if I actually go into this layer, make sure there aren't any little messy bits. So if I select that, you can see there's an extra bit of design there that I don't want it to be there. So if I just go in and delete that, make sure it's not interrupting me, I can select this area and I can add a stroke. So I'm going to add a 1 point stroke on mine. 1 point. And I can double check that the black and the stroke is all the way into the zeros by just dragging this down into the colour, right into the corner. So that one has a stroke on it. I might even just write that on here just so I know and I remember. Yellow, and then I'll say 1 PT stroke. And then I can do the same for the red. Just highlight it, make sure there aren't any weird extra bits that are being highlighted. I don't think there are. And I can add my 1 point stroke on that bit. Double check it's the perfect black, which is the zeros, and that one is also good to go. It's good to reference and write if you've added strokes on, just because it might manipulate the layer order. So what I'm going to do is print the red, then the yellow, and then the black layer is going to go over the top of them, and it's going to block out any of this stroke weight that I've added onto those. So it's just something that's good to know. These layers are now ready to be printed onto my film positives.
I've printed my film positives onto inkjet film using my Epson inkjet printer and a RIP software. The RIP software means that my printer lays down lots of thick black ink on top of each other, and this one is really nice and dense, and this is how your film positive should be. So what they're going to do is block out the UV light from reaching your emulsion, which is light sensitive. Then we're going to be able to rinse out any uncured emulsion, and that's going to give us our stencil for our printing. If this isn't something you can do in-house, there are studios which print out film positives for you and send them to you, so you can expose your own screens. If you are asking somebody else to print your positive for you, please make sure that you're, first of all, making sure that your image and your artwork is pure black. It's in the CMYK color mode on your computer, that they're using inkjet film and an inkjet printer to create your dense film positives. The next step is to coat your screens. We've already determined the screen size, so this is a 23 by 31 inch screen, and that's the outside screen dimensions. We've already figured out that our image fits in nicely there, and I've gone for a 43T mesh, which in America is a 110. This is perfect for screen printing plastisol and like nice bulky graphics onto our shirt. So this is a perfect mesh choice for us. The next thing to consider is that our mesh is nice and clean. So what we do with all of our screens before we coat them is we use degreaser on them. So degreaser is a kind of soap, but it's basically going to get rid of any grime and dust and grease on the screen surface, and going to allow our emulsion to adhere nicely to the surface of the mesh. So I spray this on and then I power wash it off, and then I let my screen dry in a nice, still, dust-free room, and then it's ready for me to coat. Another key piece of kit is your scoop coater. This is going to hold your emulsion, and it's going to allow you to apply a thin layer of emulsion to each side of your screen. So some considerations for these are, we just like this one because it's got these extended edges which kind of collect any excess emulsion on the edges. You also need to make sure that your scoop coater can very easily run all the way along the inside of your screen and on the back and cover as much of the screen as possible, but you don't want your scoop coater knocking into the edges. So this particular one fits into my screen perfectly, so that's the one we're going to choose for coating our screens. The next thing to consider is your emulsion. In our studio we print with lots of different types of ink, and we also coat screens for lots of different people, so we need a really high quality one. This is a dual cure diazo emulsion. This is the choice that we're going to be using today, and it's going to give us really nice clean sharp lines, and it's going to be resistant to our plastisol ink. Make sure you've also got a clean rag handy just for any little drips and things like that. And also we use these all the time, and they're just silicone spatulas from the kitchen department online, and that is for getting all of the excess emulsion out of the scoop coater and making sure you don't have drips on your emulsion tub. You might have noticed that I'm standing outside my darkroom, so when I've got my screens coated I want them to dry in a dark space. That's so that light and UV isn't exposing them prematurely before I come to expose them myself. So I like to keep that nice and dark and clean and dust free, and it does have lights on in there, however they have UV blockers on them to prevent them from leaking UV light onto my screens when they're just drying. Let's go into the darkroom and I'll show you how we coat our screens. When you start coating your screen, you want to coat the flat side first. So this is, the flat side is exposed to me now. And I also have it propped up against the wall and against some batons on a rubber mat. That just means that it's quite sturdy and it's not going to slip when I start coating my screen. We need to now fill our scoop coater up with some emulsion. So I'm going to take the lid off and I'm going to pour it in. I want to go for maybe just over a half full for my scoop coater, so that I've definitely got enough to create a nice even coat on my screens. I can just take off any excess drips and pop the lid back on temporarily. And we're going to use the sharper side of the scoop coater to coat the screens. I can just let that level out and let any little air bubbles pop before I coat my screen. I'm ready to coat my screen. I'm going to use that sharp edge like I just said, and I've got it quite filled up with emulsion, but not so much that when I tip it over it's going to pour out the edge. I've got the screen propped up against there, so I can just start by holding the edge up against the mesh so it's in contact with it. And then I'm making sure that my emulsion is level in my coating trough. I'm going to tip the coater probably about 45 degrees, or really it's just when the emulsion starts to make contact with the actual mesh. When it's made contact with the mesh all the way across, I can now slowly push the coater all the way up the screen. And then when I get to the top, I can just let the emulsion pour back into the trough. I can push against the mesh slightly, and then I can lift straight back, and hopefully there'll be no drips. Now I'm ready to turn the screen over and coat the other side. I can do exactly the same on the other side, and I'm going to hold it up against the mesh, but I think I have to be a little bit quicker because there's a bit of a lip to get over. So I've got it level, quickly put it in, wait for the emulsion to hit all the way across, and then I can slowly bring it up again, all the way up. Then when I get to the top, I can just tip the coater back on itself so it's level, and then I can push it into the mesh slightly and then straight back on myself, and hopefully there'll be no drips again. What you're looking for is a nice shiny, even coat. And if you've missed anything, you can potentially go over it again, and you can scoop off any drips with a silicone spatula, but really you're trying to go for just one coat on each side. It's important to dry your screens with the flat side down, facing down. I'm going to put it in one of my drying racks. This is going to be left overnight in a dark, dust-free environment, and this will allow the emulsion to fall to the underside of the screen and it will be nice and level. And when I come in the morning to expose this, it's going to be dry and exposed really nice and crisp. After coating my screen, I can put all the excess back in the tub, and the silicone spatula really helps get into all the crevices and gets all of that emulsion back in there. Then in a second I'm going to wash this up in the sink with just some water, get it dry, and it will be ready for my next coating. Once your screens are 100% dry, so for example if they've been drying all night, then they're ready to be exposed. So I'm going to lay them on my exposure unit. My exposure unit has a metal halide bulb and a vacuum blanket. There's lots of different options for exposure units. For example, there's overhanging bulbs which will also emit UV and exposure emulsion. Just an important thing to note is that your registration marks are the same distance away from the edge of the screen on all of your layers. So it's quite handy to have a set of screens that are all the same size. So I'm going to measure this a little bit more accurately, and then it will be time to put my vacuum on and expose my screens. I've measured the registration marks from the edge of the screen for all 3 screens, and they're all exactly the same. So I'm ready to go on my exposure. Your exposure times are going to be different to mine because you'll have a completely different setup, you'll have different emulsions and maybe even different mesh types. When you're ready to wash out your screen, you want to lightly rinse it on this side and then lightly rinse the other side as well. Leave for about 30 seconds and then you're able to fully wash out your screen. I can even leave that to soak for about 20-30 seconds, and then all the emulsion should just fall off. If you're noticing that your emulsion is very slimy, it's probably that it hasn't had enough UV to actually cure properly. And if you're not being able to wash out your image, it's most likely that your film positives aren't dense enough. At this point you want to just quickly inspect your screen and make sure that all the emulsion is washed out from the image areas, especially on the registration marks, which can sometimes be missed. And then this is just ready to dry. Today we're going to be using the M&R Cruiser. This is a 6-colour, 4-station carousel. So some things to look at with this particular machine are that it's got 4 pallets that move. So these are the platens where you put your shirts, and then it can hold 6 screens, which means it can hold up to 6 layers and 6 colours. You're going to find there's lots of choice on the market for picking your machine, and it might be a case of just starting out with a single colour, single station press to get you going. We can now go ahead and start registering our screens. The most easiest way that I can explain this is by putting your film positives onto your platen, and then you can just make sure the registration marks are centered onto your platen, and then we can basically mask it down all the way around so it's nice and secure in place. We're also making sure that our platen is tightened so it's not moving when we align our first screen to the film positive. At this point I can take my first layer and I'm going to pop it in one of the arms and start lining it up to the registration marks. What you're looking for is the registration marks in your screen that have been exposed. They want to line up with the registration marks that are on your film positive. So it might take a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth putting the time in now. You'll find that the emulsion is a little bit transparent to help you line those up. So I'm going to start making little micro adjustments on my screen and then tightening as I get very close to that screen being registered to the film. Once you're happy with all 4 registration marks, you can make sure everything's tight all over your press, and if you lift your screen up, then put it back down again, you can make sure that it's going to be hitting in the same place again and that your registration is good for that first screen. We're now going to repeat that step for the next 2 layers of this design, registering to the same piece of film positive on the platen. The next thing to do is to make sure that your snap, which is the distance between the platen and the underside of the screen, is even all the way across. You're looking for about £1 coin's height, and you want the screen to snap back from the platen in the same kind of distance all the way around. So you kind of want it like hovering over there quite evenly all across the screen. So on my press I have to adjust the snap with just a little bolt just here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and make sure it's level on all 3 screens and all 4 of my platens. I've got to put the new platen on this one because I must have been doing some canvas bags. As you've made some adjustments, if you've changed the snap at all, you do need to go back and make sure that your screens are all still in register with the film positive. And then the next thing to do is to make sure that the platen is in exactly the same place, in the same distance out from the press. So this measurement on my press, and that will make sure that you're printing the shirts in exactly the same location on each of your shirts when you're going around. When it comes to screen printing t-shirts, there are 3 main categories of ink: water-based, plastisol and discharge inks. Water-based inks for screen printing t-shirts and textiles can be a really good option for beginners because they are cheap to get into, you don't need much equipment, So you might just need a heat press, and when you're printing you may just need a hairdryer in order to partly dry the layers as you're printing. They're nice and vibrant. They also sink into the fabric, so they're nice and soft to touch. So there's a lot of advantages to water-based. A disadvantage might be that they dry in the screens a little bit quickly, so you do need to be quick and prepared when you're printing, because that could just be something that gets in the way of printing a consistent print run. One other disadvantage to using water-based inks might be that the curing times are quite long. So ideally you'd have a really long conveyor dryer with forced air drying the ink. However, most studios aren't set up like that, so you'd probably more likely be using a heat press, which means that you're heat pressing every single shirt for about 45 seconds to a minute. So it's okay for small runs, but if you get into the hundreds, that's going to take up a lot of your time. Plastisol ink is really widely used in the industry by lots of different professionals. This is because it's quick to use, it's very easy, it's not drying in the screens, it's vibrant, and it's got these consistent colours, and we can mix up really vibrant colours on our shirts. You can also print on a wide range of shirts, and when we're curing them we can do it really quickly with a tunnel dryer, and we can also flash the ink in between layers. The only disadvantage to the Plastisol is probably that you need some quite expensive kit to get up and running, because you need a flash dryer to cure in between layers, and even a small tunnel dryer, which is used to do the final cure, is relatively expensive. One other disadvantage might be that it's got like a slightly plasticky feel, and the ink sits on top of the shirt instead of really absorbing into it like water-based and discharging. Discharge inks can be a really cool way of printing, because say if you're printing lots of dark coloured garments, you can actually use the discharge ink to kind of strip the dyes from the garment and just leave a very, very thin layer of pigment in there, and it just feels so soft, and the longevity of that print is going to last a very long time, and it's an optimum print method. There's some disadvantages. So you're going to need a nice big tunnel dryer to be able to force the air in and really cure that design and get the chemical reaction to strip the ink pigment from the initial shirts. So that probably suits larger studios a little bit better, and there can be some fumes if you're not going for the best discharge inks that are now formaldehyde free. So there's the soft feel, which is great, but then there's just a little bit more complex equipment needed for printing discharge inks. There are another couple of little disadvantages to using the discharge inks. For example, you're going to have to really draw attention to what garments you're printing onto to make sure that they haven't been dyed multiple times, so like the cheaper garments can often have that problem. The other thing is that once you've mixed up the inks, they have a very short shelf life, so you can't come back to it in the next following days, because the chemical reaction in the inks would have already happened and they won't strip the dye from your garments. And another one, unfortunately, is that they are going to be drying into your screens a bit, because the water is going to be evaporating out the inks. So they are very, very cool, and I want you to experiment with them, but just pay attention that you need some expertise, and I wouldn't go straight into discharge ink printing. Maybe start with water-based and then advance into that kind of area. If I was suggesting an ink to go for when you're starting out in screen printing, it would probably be Plastisol ink. There is that equipment that you need, but if you get going, that you can just print really nice, rapid, vibrant designs that are consistent. And you can also get the inks that mix up all to different Pantone colours if you're printing for other people and they're very specific on their colours. So I think Plastisol is the easiest one to use. For the t-shirt design that we're going to be printing today, we're going to choose Plastisol ink. When you're screen printing your shirts, it's important to keep the shirt in place as you do your prints, especially for multicolour prints. So what we do is we have some kind of tackiness on our platen. So that might be a spray adhesive, or even this, which is dual-sided palette tape. It's basically like double-sided masking tape, and it holds the t-shirt in place while we're printing. So what you don't want to happen is for when you do one print and then the fabric jumps, falls into a slightly different position, and then when you come to print your next one, they're out of register. So you want it to be tacked down. So this is perfect, for example, with the double-sided tape. It's going to hold it in place, and then as I print, it's not going to come up, lift and fall back into another area. So that's perfect. I'll show you the two options that we use. We used to use spray adhesive, like a light mist all the way over the platen. However, this just got a little bit messy in our studio, so we've kind of moved away from that one. And then this is the big double-sided masking tape, as I'm going to describe it. And you basically roll it on the platen, and you could just keep activating it by taking off any excess lint, and it becomes tacky again and holds your shirt in place for the whole print run. If you have moving multiple platens like us, it's really useful to keep your film positive in place until after you've done your test print. So you would do a test print on a different platen, and then if there were any problems, you've still got your original one to register up against. We now need to mask off our screens anywhere where we don't want ink to go. So in that case, it's around the edges, just in case we were to rest our squeegee at the bottom and it might push some ink out into this area. And for this, I'm actually going to mask off my registration marks, as I don't want those to print on my original test prints. So I can go ahead and mask off around the edges using some screen tape. It's really worthwhile getting some high quality screen tape, just because packing tape leaves residue and it takes a lot longer to clean up. I just put it against the mesh and then I squeeze it into the edge of the frame, and I just put it all the way around. I like to put my registration tape that covers these registration marks from the underside. That's just because the squeegee is going to be running over the image area and I don't want to accidentally lift the tape off. I'm going to continue masking off my screens by doing the other two as well. I'm ready to start printing. This particular design is going on the back of my t-shirt, so I can load my shirt onto the platen. Make sure it's nice and straight. If you do have side seams, that actually makes it easier because you can keep them parallel across here. And I'm actually going to load it right the way up to the seams and make sure it's nice and smooth, no creases in there. I'm going to load up my ink onto each of my screens, so I can do that now. A couple of important things to consider when you're loading your ink is that you load it into a wall that's wider than the image area. You also want to have your squeegee, so I'm going for medium durometer blades here, and they're also wider than my image area on both sides, but not so wide that they're hitting into the edges of the screen. I'm going to print my first colour, which is this kind of creamy yellow colour. My shirt's all stuck down, everything's tight, so I'm going to get my squeegee blade covered in the ink, and I'm going to do my flood stroke. So the flood stroke is essentially filling up the ink, the mesh, with ink ready to print with. So it's not a very hard stroke, it's just kind of like a skimming over the surface. So I'm just going to build a wall, and then I'm just going to lightly push my ink all the way over the image. And then all that mesh is filled up with ink nicely. And then you can push and pull. It's a debate in the screen print community. Whichever one you feel is going to allow you to push that ink down onto the surface in the cleanest way possible. So these are quite large open areas, so I'm actually going to push. So I'm going to push down until I can fill the board, and I'm going to keep the angle of the squeegee at 45 degrees. I'm going to start before the image, and I'm going to follow all the way through, and I'm going to keep my body weight over the whole time. There's a couple of visual things that you can do to see if you've printed that nicely. First is you can see if the mesh looks like it's all one colour, so that all the ink is transferred onto the shirt. You can just lift the screen up and have a little look. Make sure you haven't missed any sections. This is down to practice, and I assure you, you will get better, but just take your time, go slow, and make sure your force is even the whole way across. This is plastisol ink, so there's a couple of ways I can do this. The way I'm going to partly dry this ink at this point is by using a flash dryer. So the flash dryer is basically like a grill, and it will go over the surface and it will heat the surface of the ink so that it's just touch dry. That's not the same as the ink being cured, which I'll do later in the tunnel dryer. So I'm going to flash this colour, make sure it's touch dry in all four corners, and then I'm ready for my second colour. After printing the first layer, I've gone and checked all four extremes, and it's not coming off on my finger. That just means that it's not going to stamp onto the underside of the next screen that I'm printing. So I'm ready to print my second colour. Again, I'm going to get my whole squeegee length covered in ink so it glides across the surface of the screen and doesn't bumble across. I'm going to build my wall of ink, and I'm just going to lightly, whilst holding the screen above, so that I'm not printing too early, I'm going to lightly push the ink so it rolls over the surface of the image. Then I can... It's actually quite a good idea to have a little bit of ink before your squeegee so that the ink rolls again and it's just quite a smooth print. So I'm going to push down onto the platen again until I fill the board underneath me, and then I'm just going to slowly shear the ink through onto the surface of the top. So about that, all the way across. And at this point I can do my flood for my next one, but I'll do that when I get into the actual printing. So a very quick visual check, I can see that the mesh looks very clear, and then I can lift the screen up and have another little look. At this point I can check the registration, and it looks like I've done a pretty decent job because there's two areas here which should be butting up against each other and they look dead on. I think I'll be able to figure that out fully in the next layer when I come to printing the black colour. This is now ready for a quick flash, and it just needs to be touch dry again until I can do the black. I'm ready for my final layer, which will bring it all together. This is quite exciting. Again, get my squeegee covered in the ink. This is particularly thick ink. You can stir your ink a little bit looser, or even add some curable reducer if you want the viscosity to be a little bit more. So I'm just going to do my flood stroke. I'm going to keep my angle the same the whole way across and shear the ink through onto the shirt. I'm really excited about that. It looks really nice. I'll get it off the press and I'll have a thorough inspection, but it looks like we did a good job on it. At this point you don't need to put it under the flash again, unless you're worried about it touching itself when you pull it off. So this can go onto my conveyor dryer for a full cure. When we're ready to put this in the conveyor dryer, it's important that it's flat, and we're actually trying to get the surface of the ink temperature to about 165 degrees. It'll tell you on your plastisol ink tub what temperature and how long to have it curing for and heating for, but this is quite a handy little thing. They're just infrared guns and they're relatively cheap, and what it does is, if you're quite close up, you can point the little laser at the surface of the ink and you can see that it gets up to temperature. So when my dryer has been on for quite a little while, I'll be able to lean down, point at the ink surface as it goes under the tunnel dryer and make sure it hits that crucial 165 degrees. For up to about a minute would be perfect. Then we can do a couple of little tests to see if our ink is cured. Fortunately, at this point we're very happy with our registration, which is to do with the layers lining up and covering each other. However, it might be the case that your layers aren't measuring up and lining up perfectly with each other. So at this point you would actually need to remove the ink from certain parts of your screen wherever there's registration marks, and you'd have to look through the screen again onto the registration that's actually been printed onto the film positive. Hopefully that's still in place on your platen and you can refer to that, make adjustments and then print a new test shirt. As we don't need to do any further adjustments on our registration, everything's tight, so then we can just remove this film positive off here, and we're going to actually load up all 4 platens with shirts, because we're going to be able to move our platens underneath the flash like that, and we're going to print each colour, flash each colour, and then build up the colours until we've got 4 complete shirts to put into the conveyor dryer. We're really happy with how the back designs come out, so we're thinking about doing a front design as well now, and we're going to use exactly the same method. Now I have my back design printed and also my left chest. So I think what will finish this shirt off is having a neck label with my brand name on the inside. So I'm actually going to use a slightly different platen, so I'm just going to put that on now. I'm going to use the sleeve platen and then screen print directly into my inside neck. This is the sleeve platen and it just slides onto my press. And then I'm literally just going to rest my t-shirt on there as I print it. When I've got that taped up, it will be ready in a second, but just to show you, I'm basically going to just pop my t-shirt on there and let it hang underneath, and that just gives me the perfect amount of area to be able to screen print directly my inside neck tag. On my particular shirt I have quite a thick hem, so I actually don't want to be pulling across that hem, I want to be pushing the print up towards it so that I'm not like bumbling over it. I've also distinguished how high I want to be placing the shirt onto the platen, and I've done a little line there as a guide, so that when I put my shirt on I'm going to line it up against the top hem, and I've got just the right amount of area here to be able to push my design and screen print that in place. I like to use different colours on my prints. So on my inside neck label, I'm going to be using the yellow from inside the eye, because I don't think it's going to show through on the other side, and I think it's like quite a cool little design feature that I like to work into all of my shirts. So this is how my inside neck label came out. I even managed to get the little registered sign, so that's really cool. So you can get lots of detail in there if you're precise about it. And I'm happy with there not being too much show through on the other side. So this is ready to go in the tunnel dryer like all the others, and as long as I lay it flat, it should be able to still cure under the heat. Again, I'm still trying to get this to 165 degrees for around a minute in order for that to cure nicely. So I'm going to pop it in the tunnel dryer and get it cured. Now we've finished our print run, it's really important to get the screen nice and clean, ready for storage. This particular image is going to be used for all of our designs as the neck label logo that we print in the inside neck. So I simply just need to remove this plastisol ink and get it into storage. As this is plastisol ink, the method that we're going to use is very simple. We're first going to take the excess ink off, then we're going to remove the tape, and then we're going to use Easy Solve 701, which cuts through the plastisol ink, and we're going to put some of that on a rag and clean off all of the plastisol ink ready for storage. If you were using water-based ink, you would simply just need to use a sponge and some water to remove the water-based ink, and it is important to clean that thoroughly so next time you come to print it's really nice and clear. A professional way to finish off your branding for your t-shirts might be to include swing tickets like this one, and then we've also got our storage bags which are screen printed. We also include sweetie bags. These have stickers and also sweets in them as a thank you. We also have mailers which are screen printed too. Let me show you how we go about making our swing tickets. In order to add our swing tickets, we actually started when we picked our shirt. So with this kind of shirt, we have the size label and it's like a little hoop. So we're gonna actually attach the swing ticket to that label. We had business cards printed, and these are Lux 800 GSM cards. They're really thick. And we even took the time to print a little dot there, and that will show us where to create a hole to be able to attach some string to be able to put it on our shirt. So I'm using an eyelet machine. You can get these from DIY shops. And then I'm gonna create the hole first, just in the top, where that dot told me to. And then I'm gonna put the eyelet in. This just creates a really nice professional finish. And then I can stamp the eyelet to secure it. And then I use a little bit of black thread looped through the size ticket, and then that will hang my swing ticket there and it'll look really professional. All of our shirts are printed in limited edition, so we like to show that off by adding a holographic sticker to the swing ticket. So I can add my one on there. And then if this was going in a shop, you've even got room for a barcode on the back. So that looks really good and is a professional finish. Another easy part of branding that you can implement for your brand is screen printing your packaging. These are actually just fruit bags that we use for our t-shirts to store them in, and we screen print those very much like how we did our t-shirts. So I'm going to show you how we do that on press. You can use your carousel in much the same way as printing t-shirts to print simple paper and card. So here I have my bag on my sticky platen, and then I'm simply using a different style screen. So this one has a 90T mesh, which just means that it's got finer holes and it's going to be able to hold the detail but not apply too much ink onto our paper, because paper isn't as absorbent as t-shirts. I'm going to use exactly the same type of squeegee, and then the ink I'm using is actually especially made for paper and card, and it's a water-based ink, so it's really easy to clean up with water afterwards, and we even only just need it to air dry. We don't need to put it under a conveyor dryer or a flash or anything like that. So I can go ahead and use the same technique that I used to print the t-shirts to print these bags. Once I have that printed, I want to let it air dry, so I'm going to put it on my little rack, but you could lay them around the room if you haven't got a rack. So when they're touch dry, they'll be ready to use. We've used this exact same technique to print both of our bags, so our mailers and our sweetie bags. And we've also even put stickers to seal our bags for when they're going in the post. All these things together are going to make your brand look so professional. Thank you so much for taking this course. I hope you found it really useful, and we would love to see what t-shirts you print for your brand. Make sure to think about how many colours you have in your design, what finishing touches you might add to your brand, and even what type of t-shirt you're printing onto. Let us know how you got on and contact us with any questions you might have so we can point you in the right direction.